The desert wind carried secrets through Redemption Valley, and Jake Thunder Morrison knew how to read every whisper. His weathered hands gripped the reins as his stallion approached the abandoned mission, where smoke curled like a woman's sigh against the crimson sunset. The leather of his chaps creaked with each movement, a symphony of masculinity that had tamed both wild horses and wilder hearts. She emerged from the shadows like a mirage, Isabella Delacroix, the French widow whose reputation preceded her like lightning before thunder. Her emerald dress clung to curves that could make a saint reconsider his vows, and her dark eyes held mysteries deeper than the Grand Canyon. But there was something else in those eyes, fear, raw and primal. "Don't come any closer, cowboy," she warned, her accent thick as molasses on a summer morning. Her voice trembled like autumn leaves, betraying the steel she tried to project. "I'm not what you think I am." Jake dismounted with the fluid grace of a predator, his spurs singing against the dusty ground. The scent of leather and sage surrounded him like an aura of pure masculinity. "Ma'am, I reckon I know exactly what you are," he drawled, his voice rough as sandpaper on silk. "You're trouble in a pretty package, and I've always had a weakness for both." Isabella's breath caught as he approached, each step deliberate as a chess master's move. The setting sun painted his rugged features in gold and shadow, highlighting the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a mark of battles fought and won. His presence filled the space between them like smoke filling a saloon. "You don't understand," she whispered, backing against the mission wall. The ancient stones seemed to pulse with the heat radiating from her body. "I'm cursed. Every man who's touched me has—" She couldn't finish the sentence, her lips trembling like rose petals in a storm. Jake stopped just close enough that she could smell his intoxicating blend of tobacco, leather, and something indefinably male. "Cursed, you say?" His laugh was low and dangerous, like distant thunder promising rain. "Lady, I've been to hell and back. Your curse would have to get in line." The space between them crackled with electricity more powerful than any desert storm. Isabella's chest rose and fell rapidly, her breathing shallow as a frightened doe's. But in her eyes, fear was slowly being replaced by something else, a hunger she'd tried to bury deeper than any grave. "Please," she breathed, her voice barely audible above the evening wind. "Don't touch me. I can't. I won't be responsible for what happens." Jake's hand moved slowly toward her face, stopping just inches from her cheek. The heat between them was palpable, like standing too close to a forge. "Darlin'," he murmured, his voice like velvet over steel. "I've never been one to back down from a challenge." As if summoned by their tension, a rider appeared on the horizon, a silhouette against the dying light that made Isabella gasp, and Jake's hand instinctively moved to his Colt. The newcomer's approach sent dust devils dancing around them like spirits awakened by forbidden desire. "He's found me," Isabella whispered, her face draining of color. "The Apache chief's son. He believes I belong to him, that I'm his promised bride. But what he doesn't know—" She looked up at Jake with eyes that held 1,000 untold stories. "What no one knows is that I'm not just a widow. I'm a woman with blood on her hands and fire in her soul." The rider drew closer, and Jake could see the war paint gleaming on bronze skin, the eagle feathers dancing in black hair. But instead of fear, he felt something else stirring in his chest, a protective instinct as fierce as any wildfire. "Well then, beautiful," Jake said, his voice steady as bedrock. "Looks like this evening just got a whole lot more interesting." The Apache warrior's horse thundered to a halt 20 paces away, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. Running Wolf dismounted with the fluid grace of his ancestors, his obsidian eyes fixed on Isabella with an intensity that could melt steel. War paint streaked his bronze chest, and the eagle feather in his hair caught the last rays of sunlight like a blade. "White Dove," he called to Isabella, his voice carrying the authority of generations of chiefs. "You cannot run from what was promised. The spirits have spoken. You belong with our people." Jake's hand hovered near his gun, but Isabella stepped forward, her chin raised with defiance that made his blood sing. "I belong to no one, Running Wolf. Not to you, not to any man." Her voice carried a strength that surprised even her, like discovering a hidden spring in the desert. The Apache warrior's gaze shifted to Jake, sizing him up like a wolf evaluating a rival. "And you, cowboy? Do you know what woman you defend? Do you know the blood that stains her hands?" Isabella's sharp intake of breath was like a knife cutting through the tension. Jake felt her tremble beside him, but he didn't move, didn't flinch. "I know she's under my protection now," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of an unbreakable vow. Running Wolf laughed, but there was no humor in it, only the bitter sound of a man who'd lost everything. "She killed my father, the great chief Standing Bear. With poison in his evening meal, she sent him to the spirit world. And still, I would take her as my bride, for the prophecy must be fulfilled." The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. Isabella's secret hung between them like smoke from a funeral pyre. He could feel her eyes on him, waiting for his reaction, expecting him to turn away in disgust. Instead, Jake stepped closer to her, his presence a shield against the world's judgment. "Every person's got their reasons," he said quietly, "and every person deserves a chance at redemption." Isabella's eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He was going to sacrifice 20 white children to ensure a good harvest. I couldn't. I wouldn't let innocent blood be spilled." Her voice broke like a dam bursting. "But the poison I used, it was meant for me. I was going to end my own suffering. But when I saw those children, the truth hung in the desert air like heat shimmer, distorting everything they thought they knew." Running Wolf's face contorted with pain and understanding. "You saved them," he said slowly, his voice hollow as an empty grave. "You saved the children my father would have killed. And condemned myself in the process," Isabella added, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Apache want me dead for murder. The whites want me dead for living among the Apache. I'm a woman with nowhere to go and no one to trust." Jake's hand finally moved, not to his gun, but to gently touch Isabella's shoulder. The contact sent electricity through both of them, a current stronger than any lightning strike. "You've got someone now," he said simply. Running Wolf watched this exchange with eyes that held centuries of wisdom and pain. The prophecy spoke of a white dove who would bring both death and salvation to our people. I thought it meant she would be my bride, would bear children to continue our bloodline. He paused, studying Jake with new interest. But perhaps the spirits meant something else entirely. The desert wind picked up, swirling around the three of them like a living thing. Isabella felt something shifting inside her chest, a warmth she hadn't experienced since childhood, the feeling of being truly seen and accepted despite her darkest secrets. "There's something else," she said, her voice gaining strength. "The real reason I can't be touched can't be with any man." She looked directly at Jake, her green eyes blazing with inner fire. "I'm not cursed by magic or spirits. I'm cursed by my own heart. Every man I've ever cared for has died protecting me. My husband, my brother, even the Apache brave who helped me escape the first time." Jake's smile was slow and dangerous, like sunrise over a battlefield. "Darling," he drawled, "I've been dancing with death my whole life. Your curse and I are old friends." As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching horses echoed across the valley, a posse riding hard and fast, their intentions as clear as the guns gleaming in their hands. The posse rode like demons unleashed from hell, their horses' hooves pounding a rhythm of vengeance against the hard-pan desert floor. Sheriff Marcus Blackwood led the charge, his silver badge catching moonlight like a fallen star. Behind him rode 12 men with murder in their eyes, and rope coiled at their saddles. Men who'd come to collect the bounty on Isabella's head. "There!" Blackwood's voice cut through the night air like a whip crack. "The Apache witch and her protectors." Jake's hand moved to his Colt with the speed of a striking rattlesnake. "Isabella, get behind the mission wall," he commanded, his voice steady as granite despite the odds. "Running Wolf, you with me or against me?" The Apache warrior's answer came in the form of a war cry that raised the hair on every man's neck. He drew his tomahawk, the blade singing through the air like a bird of prey. "Tonight we fight as brothers," he declared, positioning himself beside Jake. Isabella pressed herself against the adobe wall, her heart hammering like a blacksmith's anvil. But instead of cowering, she reached into her boot and withdrew a derringer, small but deadly, like a scorpion's sting. "I won't hide while good men die for me," she said, her voice fierce as a wildcat's growl. The first shots rang out like thunder in a clear sky. Jake moved with lethal precision, his colt barking death at the approaching riders. 2 men fell from their saddles before the others could take cover behind scattered boulders and scrub brush. "Give us the woman, Morrison," Blackwood shouted from behind a rock formation. "She's wanted for murder and witchcraft. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jake's laugh was dark as midnight coffee. "Sheriff, the only thing hard around here is going to be explaining to these men's widows why you led them to their deaths." Running Wolf moved like liquid shadow, his tomahawk finding its mark with deadly accuracy. But it was Isabella who surprised them all. Her derringer spoke twice, and 2 more bounty hunters discovered that angels of death sometimes wore emerald dresses. The battle raged under a canopy of stars, muzzle flashes lighting the desert like fireflies of destruction. Jake felt a bullet graze his shoulder. The burn of it nothing compared to the fire in his chest when he saw Isabella in danger. "Behind you!" she screamed, and Jake spun to find Blackwood bearing down on him with a knife gleaming like liquid mercury. The sheriff was fast, but Jake was faster. They grappled in the dust, rolling like tumbleweeds in a storm. Blackwood's blade sliced through Jake's shirt, drawing a line of crimson across his ribs. "She's a killer, Morrison," Blackwood gasped as they struggled. "She poisoned a chief. She's got the devil's own mark on her." "Maybe," Jake grunted, driving his knee into the sheriff's solar plexus. "But she's my devil now." With a move learned in a dozen saloon fights, Jake broke free and landed a haymaker that sent Blackwood sprawling. The sheriff's head struck a rock with a sound like a melon dropping, and he lay still as death. The remaining bounty hunters, seeing their leader fallen and half their number dead or wounded, began to retreat. Their horses' hooves faded into the distance like a bad dream dissolving at dawn. Isabella ran to Jake, her hands fluttering over his wounds like butterfly wings. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've had worse from Sunday school teachers," Jake said, trying to lighten the mood. But when her fingers touched his chest, checking the knife wound, the contact sent electricity through his entire body. Her touch was gentle as morning dew, yet it burned like desert fire. "Why?" she asked, her green eyes searching his face. "Why risk everything for a woman you barely know? A woman with blood on her hands?" Jake's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of a tear she didn't know she'd shed. "Because, darlin', I've been looking for something worth dying for my whole life. Turns out, I found something worth living for instead." Running Wolf approached them, his bronze skin gleaming with sweat and blood. "The spirits have shown me the truth," he said solemnly. "White Dove was never meant to be my bride. She was meant to heal the wound between our peoples, to show that love can bridge any divide." Isabella looked between the 2 men who'd risked everything for her, one seeking redemption for his people's pain, the other offering redemption for her own sins. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Deserve's got nothing to do with it," Jake said, his voice rough as sandpaper on silk. "Love doesn't ask permission and it doesn't check credentials. It just is." As if to punctuate his words, the desert wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of sage and possibility. The 3 of them stood in the aftermath of violence, but what hung in the air between them wasn't the smell of gunpowder, it was the promise of new beginnings. Dawn painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, like a master artist's final masterpiece. The mission bells, silent for decades, seemed to whisper promises on the morning breeze. Jake sat against the adobe wall, his shirt torn and blood-stained, watching Isabella tend to Running Wolf's wounds with the gentle efficiency of a woman who'd seen too much violence. "The nearest town is Salvation Creek," Running Wolf said, wincing as Isabella cleaned a bullet graze on his arm. "My people have friends there, traders who won't ask questions about a woman with a price on her head." Isabella's hand stilled for a moment. "You're helping me escape again," she said softly. "After everything I've done to your family." The Apache warrior's eyes held depths of wisdom earned through suffering. "My father was a great chief, but his heart had turned to stone. You reminded him that it still beat, even if only for a moment before it stopped forever." He paused, studying her face. "Sometimes the greatest mercy is the hardest choice." Jake stood slowly, his body protesting every movement. The knife wound across his ribs had stopped bleeding, but it pulled tight with each breath. "Salvation Creek's 3 days hard ride," he said. "We'll need supplies, fresh horses, and a damn good story." "We?" Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper, hope and fear warring in her green eyes. Jake's smile was slow and sure as sunrise. "Darlin', I told you last night, you're under my protection now. That doesn't end just because the shooting stopped." Running Wolf rose to his feet, testing his wounded arm. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "The tribal elders spoke of a sign. When the white dove finds her thunder, the long war between our peoples will begin to heal." Isabella looked between the two men, her heart hammering like a hummingbird's wings. "Thunder," she repeated, her gaze settling on Jake. "That's what they call me," Jake confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "Jake Thunder Morrison, though most folks just hear the noise and miss the meaning." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Isabella felt something shifting inside her chest, like ice breaking up on a frozen river. For the first time in years, she could imagine a future that didn't end in violence or solitude. "I have money," she said suddenly. "Gold hidden in the mission. Enough to start over somewhere new, maybe even buy a small ranch." She looked directly at Jake, her eyes blazing with newfound courage. "If you're serious about protection, Cowboy, I'm serious about making it worth your while." Jake stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something indefinably masculine. "Isabella," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "I don't want your gold." "Then what do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling like aspen leaves. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "I want to wake up every morning knowing you're safe. I want to teach you that not every man's touch brings death. I want to show you that some storms are worth dancing in." The space between them crackled with electricity more powerful than any lightning strike. Isabella's breath came in short gasps, her body responding to his proximity like a flower turning toward the sun. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "What if the curse is real? What if I lose you too?" "Then we'll face it together," Jake said simply. "But I've got a feeling your curse is about to meet its match." Running Wolf cleared his throat, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "The spirits are laughing," he said. "They enjoy a good love story as much as anyone." Isabella's laugh was like silver bells in the wind, the first genuine joy she'd felt in years. "A love story," she repeated. "Is that what this is?" Jake's answer came not in words but in action. His lips found hers in a kiss that was gentle as morning rain and fierce as desert lightning. Isabella melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted of hope and redemption, of new beginnings written in starlight. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. "Well," Jake said, his voice husky with emotion, "I reckon that settles it." "Settles what?" Isabella asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. "Whether or not you're worth the trouble," Jake replied, his grin wicked as sin and twice as tempting. "Turns out you're worth a whole lot more than trouble, Isabella Delacroix. You're worth everything." As they prepared to leave the mission behind, Isabella felt the weight of her past lifting like morning mist. The woman who'd lived in shadows was ready to step into the light, protected by thunder and guided by love. The desert stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities. And for the first time in her life, Isabella wasn't running from something. She was running toward it, toward a future where curses could be broken and hearts could heal. Behind them, the mission bells began to ring, their bronze voices carrying across the valley like a benediction. The sound followed them as they rode toward Salvation Creek, toward redemption, toward a love story written in the stars and sealed with desert thunder.